come together to give guidance to staff regarding items on the agenda. So I am calling us to order at 12 noon and open the meeting up to public comment on all items. This is a time to comment on any matter, agenda or non-agenda, falling within the scope of the Billings City Council. If you have anything to say, please make sure you're signed in, come to the podium, tell us your name, where you live, and take your 3 minutes and have your say. Is there any public comment? I'll ask one last time, any public comment? All right, I will close that part and we'll move to the agenda. You guys ready for part 2? Before you get started, I just wanted to give a hearty and warm welcome to our Senator Southside Mike Yakowicz. Welcome, sir. It's nice to have you in chambers. Okay, guys, now you're on.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us back. Can everyone hear me? Because we kept getting comments. Okay, so I thought what we would start off with is just a brief run through of everything that had been given direction regarding the last meeting, and then we could pick up where we left off on item I. We did our best to try to capture everything. So with that being said, feel free to interrupt if you've got questions or statements or things that we need to know. But the first one was A, and that's allowed for the duplex where a single unit dwelling was permitted. And what we heard from council is that this would be incorporated as an incentive for the community. B is the higher density housing near transit areas and places of employment, higher education facilities, population centers, as designated by council. And this was, we were going to try to create an overlay or create higher land use designations in those areas. Of course, discussing the designated areas with council whenever that time came. Why did you have a, okay, I just wanted to make sure. C was the eliminate or reduce off-street parking. This was an item that was associated with the Montana Land Use Planning Act, but then was passed as a bill in this past legislative session. So it's one of those situations, as we discussed last time, where it was incorporated in May or abide by it in October. So this was when we decided to go ahead and incorporate. D is the eliminate impact fees for accessory dwelling units. This was something that council's direction was to navigate whenever we undergo the infill policy in winter and spring. So looking at that then, as we understand that impact fees can be substantial and we just need to make sure that we have the right things identified there. E is for a permitted use of a detached accessory dwelling unit where a single unit was allowed. So the advice from council was to continue implementing that. We have been following that already as a city. F is single room occupancy developments. That's already in the code. We're going to continue the implementation of that within the code. And then G is allow for a triplex or fourplex where a single unit dwelling is permitted. The direction from council was to not investigate this further whenever we go through the infill policy in the spring and winter. H is the elimination of minimum lot sizes. This was the one that I had identified incorrectly in the presentation the last time. We have already been in compliance with this, and so we will continue being in compliance with this. And then I is where we pick up where we left off. So I is eliminate aesthetic, material, shape, bulk size, floor area, and other massing requirements for multi-unit dwellings or mixed unit developments, or remove at least half of these requirements. So the direction from the IPC was to not implement this. We use these standards whenever it comes to the eBird district that we all have. Those are standards that we would like to navigate with the eBird district that are specific, but still keeping some of those aesthetic requirements that exist. Wyatt, did you have anything to add?
Just to add that, I mean, for the most part, just a little more background on when we updated our entire city zoning code in 2021, there was a lot of time spent on these discussions, whether to increase and add aesthetic requirements and material requirements and stuff across the city, especially like for commercial construction. And the community's determination and our special committees and ultimately council was to not do anything more with that, mainly because of the issues you can get into with building requirements and materials where costs change and different things happen. So the idea was to leave that alone. So for the most part, as Anna said, aside from the eBird, which is actually very limited, also the rest of the city, you really don't have most of those items at all really in our regulations. And so that's kind of where we ended up. And that's, I think, where the IPC ended up too.
Mayor. Mr. Neese?
Thank you. So Wyeth and Anna, the eBird is really the one that's stopping the city from saying, yeah, this one qualifies. Is that, sorry, get a little closer. The eBird is the one that says, because we're abiding for eBird, we can't actually say that we meet this qualification because of eBird. Is that, do I understand that correctly? You're saying eBird's rules kind of have some specific design code that it prevents us as a city from adopting this.
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, I guess two things. One, I would say I wouldn't necessarily, and this I guess would be a question for us to visit with legal. I'm not sure if because one area of the entire community has something that means that, you know, we're completely out of alignment with it. But I would say that there are pieces in here that we all, I mean, a little bit with bulk and size and such on structures, you know, there's a little bit of that across the city. So that's really, I think, why we would say, you know, there's really nothing really here to do with this, because there's not enough to take out to really make a big impact. But that's my take. So I don't know in terms of trying to say, oh yeah, we meet this. I think that would be difficult, you know, across the city because we have just a little bit here and there, but not overall. So.
Okay, so if the city is not following this, generally the city itself is not, it doesn't have a whole lot of requirements, if I understand you correctly, very, very minimal. So I don't know what half of what the state was expecting, because they'd say half of. Well, it's a little ambiguous because the city Billings is already maybe, you know, 10% of what other cities are doing, right? And so how can the state judge us to say we have to do half of what we're doing when other cities, their half is still going to be doing double or triple than what we're doing? And so it seems to me like this isn't even applicable to the city Billings. And so we should say, yeah, we're already doing it. And if the state objects to that, we can say, well, listen, we're only doing three things that are restrictive, and the city of Bozeman cut theirs down to 12, you know? And so why, and I guess maybe this is a question for Gina, is why can't we claim this as we are doing this? And because of eBird is a TIF district, that's a special district, that is probably going to be allowable under state law anyway, that TIFs can do certain things different than the city. So can we not count this as a qualified?
We can have Gina chime in, I guess, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council. I feel like, I mean, if we want to, I guess, sort of quote unquote fight that battle to say, yeah, we're mostly, I agree with you that the language is very vague and not very helpful, like for sure. Because half of what, but I would say, I'm not sure, you know, if you want us to pursue that further to be able to try to add it, we can. I'm not sure if it's worth that.
So. My recommendation would be, we're going to be well over the minimum of 5. And so if we add this one, maybe we'll be at 10. And so when you present it to the state in May and they say, well, wait a minute, you didn't do this number I, you can fight the battle at that time and say, well, okay, fine. And you prove it that we didn't do it. They prove it. And then we have to say, okay, no, instead of 10, we got 9. And so it seems to me like we should count this because, again, we did a lot of different things throughout the city, and we need to start fighting for the credit that we as a city did already that other cities didn't do. So that would be my recommendation, to say, yeah, we just check it off as we're already implemented it. We're done. and move on to the next one.
I think to your point, I completely agree with you. Perhaps when we're presenting to the state, our commentary regarding I should be we do not have architectural design standards the way that other communities in Montana do. And maybe that's what we're saying to the state. While we acknowledge that we do have limiting aesthetic and material requirements, it's within our TIF district, and highlighting that could maybe fit the bill. I think I would defer to legal whether we could actually tick the box, but I do agree we should highlight the fact that we do not have those architectural design standards the way that, say, Bozeman or Whitefish or Kalispell has, and that makes us different, and we are promoting housing in that sense.
Yeah, I think until we start pushing back gently to the state that, hey, we have already met these, and they see the fact that we're actually doing this already, they have to update this law a little bit to be a little more clear, to give credit for those cities who are already meeting the law. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Are we all in agreement that we can leave the eBird the way that it is regarding this standard?
I think
I
we
have
are.
no objection to eBird.
Okay, perfect. We'll move on to the next one. So Jay was regarding the tiny homes. The direction that we received from City Council was to leave this in the code as we have this and have a specific call out saying that tiny homes are allowed within our residential districts. K is eliminate setback requirements or reduce existing setback requirements by at least 25%. The recommendation from the Interim Planning Commission was to not implement this. This is regarding, we have mostly build-to zones throughout the city zoning code. We do have one district that has a front setback, that is our N3 district, but we've heard from the development community that they do like the N3 district, the way that it's set up. We also have side and rear setbacks as well. So to that point, since we have side and rear setbacks in the one district that has the front setback, we feel like we're doing a really good job with this as a city. We don't have, through Project Recode, we had a really good come forward moment where we have now build-to requirements which have like the leniency that's there. Due to that, the Interim Planning Commission's recommendation was to not implement this and to leave it as we have the code right now.
Deputy Mayor.
Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it short, but I'm going to recommend the same thing we do. I'm recommending on that we take credit for this one, because again, we did a whole lot within the city as far as helping with setbacks, and the bare minimum setbacks that the city did was basically fire code, which has nothing to do with anything other than the safety of the residents in the building and the neighbors around. So I think we need to, again, claim this one to the state regardless. The worst thing they're going to do is say, no, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for 11. Now you've only got 10 or something like that. So my recommendation would be to see that. So I'm not sure if we're supposed to be talking about each one of these as we go through. That's why I'm interrupting and giving my opinion. I don't hear other council members chiming in on that, but I just wanted to, in case we were going to just adopt whatever we heard later on. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to step out. There's a fire alarm at the Billings Empire Garage. So it's in the construction zone. And so I missed, but so if I'm wrong and talking about the wrong thing, just correct me. But in the last meeting, we had begun the process of saying yes or no to these separate things during the end. And I think that's just what we're continuing to do.
Correct.
Okay, so if we are, because we didn't, I mean, she said yes to the I, but I didn't hear anything. Jason code. I would say K again. We want to take credit and say we've already doing this, state. Thank you very much for putting this in there, because we already meet this requirement.
So, Mr. Espenlater?
I would agree with Councilman Neese on this one. Like, we already did it, so check the box and acknowledge or make aware that we already did this. It may have been prior to you creating this. We can't do 25% more than what we already did, because we already took it as low as we could possibly take it. So, like, I just check the box and take the victory lap on this one.
We were talking about racing earlier, weren't we? Yeah, can council give them direction to do that? You guys, people okay with that? Nod your heads. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. L is increase building height limits for dwelling units by at least 25%. The direction from the the recommendation from the interim planning commission was to not implement this. This was something that we've had a discussion about in depth as a community. Every time we see a zone change that's happening where we have, a zoning that allows for 2-story home, but it's only built as a single level. And then you have an adjacent zoning that's coming in that's also residential. So you wouldn't have, say, a step back that would be in the building height, which would help eliminate some of that front wall that was facing another building. So what we'd like to have is a little bit of that buffer between different heights within residential. And due to that, we do not want to increase the building height limits because I don't think that's our limiting portion associated with accommodating residential. We want to be aware of where we're building and aware of the surrounding and be compatible with the neighborhood, but also allow for density and have those items be implementable and with the character of that area.
Questions or comments?
Thank you,
Sure.
Mayor. As you know, this is a passion of mine. So, and I agree with 100% of what you said. And so again, I can't, this is one thing I can tell you, I don't know what the height limits were before recode. Did recode adjust height limits and increase them in any way already when we went through recode?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, we made some minor adjustments. I would have to go back and look, and then when we got into our mixed use districts and such, which is out of kind of just the residential area portion, we made some changes. So, but yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at exactly how big a change.
And what changes were higher, lower?
Tall, yeah, higher, taller.
And that's what that's what I thought was we were doing. And so, again, this is one of those ones where I think if you look at what we already did as a city, we may already get credit for it. So if we're approaching that, during recode, we already increased it by 25%. Again, I would recommend saying, let's check the box and do that. But otherwise, you're right. I wouldn't implement. I agree that we don't implement anything more. But if we can already check the box because we did it before the state finally figured out what was going on, then let's check the box.
Are we in agreement?
Wow, this is going so smoothly. Maybe we should always get whatever we got for lunch today.
See, we like the rockets.
All right. Allow for multi-unit dwellings or mixed-use development where office, retail, and commercial are. So we did this with recode. We also have been implementing this since before 2023. So this, we're already in compliance, and we're going to continue to be in compliance with this, was the direction we heard last meeting. N is allow for multi-unit dwellings as a permitted use on all lots where triplexes or fourplexes are permitted use. The interim planning commission was still exploring this. That being said, allowing for triplexes and fourplexes where multi-unit dwellings are, that kind of eliminates your duplex in single family zonings, right? Like we just go straight from single family to triplex, fourplex. That being said, I'll leave it to council. Maybe it's something we explore with the infill policy. Maybe I'll just, that's what my thought is.
Mr. Neese? Mr. Aspenliner?
Yeah, this one for me is a hard no. Like I got no interest in talking about this because I think it's bad policy. I think it creates density probably in areas where we don't want density, and it opens the door to a lot more conflict with neighbors and neighborhoods. And I don't think this one is worth even spending any more time on because I think it has a whole lot of unintended consequences. Even with the best of intentions, we could screw this one up.
Now, Mr. Neese?
Yes, thank you. Just for clarification on this, what this is talking about, first of all, I agree with Councilman Aspenliner on this, but I need to clarify this because I understand this multi-unit dwellings is permitted on lots or triplex, fourplexes, not as well as I do the N series codes. So are you saying basically allowing the NX where permitted on the N type property? Do I understand that correctly?
I might have said it wrong. What it is basically you would skip triplex and fourplex and have very high density essentially. So our NX3 or NX2 is 5 units, and then 8 and 9 units is what NX3 is, 9 units plus. So essentially you would go from single family duplex to then having 5+ units.
Okay.
Anywhere that triplex and fourplex would be allowed.
So you'd go from N2, N3 to NX3. Everything in between would be eliminated in a sense.
In a sense, yes. And it just doesn't allow for gentle density in appropriate situations is what I could see tentatively happening.
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand a little bit better and still agree 100% with what was said.
Any other questions? Councilperson Nicholson?
Is this the missing middle concept where you have several stories and a number of
You could argue that missing middle is a very large span of properties, right? Like it's basically a duplex all the way up to a multi-unit apartment complex building. That being so broad is hard to be specific with what we need in the community. I think when we have residential zoning, it's good to allow for predictability and it's good to allow for gentle density in areas. So having that missing middle can still be achieved by having a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, but doesn't necessarily need to be called out on every single lot that allows for a triplex and a fourplex, if that makes sense. To me, in my mind, yes, it is missing middle to an extent, right? Like we have to allow for our neighbors to have predictability and our citizens to have predictability. And you can still achieve it with pretty much everything on this list helps address a missing middle complex, if that helps you a little bit there too.
I just don't want to eliminate that as a possibility. So are there other zonings where you can do missing middle?
So Councilmember Nichols, I think to what Anna's saying, so right now with so our N1 and 2 zones allow up to duplexes plus ADUs, and then you get to NX1 and you can do the 4 units. I think what we are seeing in terms of kind of the narrower, like Anna's talking about, the narrower missing middle, which is not like the 30 unit apartment buildings. It's more of that triplex, duplex, triplex, fourplex type of development and potentially ADUs. I think we have a pretty good variety, several options in our current districts to accommodate that. And the way we're looking at the future land use designations also helps to open that up a little bit, because there's in some of the categories, there's a couple different districts you can pick from that get you to that little bit higher density.
Any other comment? As far as direction goes, then for staff, would we all shake our heads no on this one? All right. Yes is a no.
Okay, so this slide was essentially just trying to have all of them on the same slide, because I know that Councilmember Boyette was looking for that at the last meeting and I didn't know how much back and forth I would need to do. So I just included it just in case. One thing we wanted to circle back to is there were 2 questions that came out of last meeting. The first one was associated with the aggrieved parties. And so we had a conversation with legal, and the appeal of the aggrieved parties, I can let Gina or Jessica chime in here, but aggrieved parties meaning somebody that has seen actual injurious, something that they can claim is injurious that has happened from the zone change decision.
Good afternoon. I don't think I've met most of you. My name is Jessica McKee. I work in legal as part of the civil division, and I'm helping with this project. So there's a lot of dense terms, even for a lawyer who's been practicing 18 years, in this whole statute. As far as aggrieved party goes, that is distinct. It's a distinct requirement from the notice requirement, that where we give people time to come in and say what they think about a law going into place. An aggrieved party comes into effect when there is a zoning action, whether it's a granting of a permit for a development or some other action that's taken under an existing law, that causes injury to a specific party. If they are aggrieved under the statute, which means that they have an injury that's not just general, as in my property value can go down probably because that's what tends to happen, but some specific injury, they can appeal. And I always get this wrong, they appeal to the Planning Commission. And that's their specific remedy, as opposed to the notice requirement, which gives the public to come in, like time to come in and comment as you're accustomed to when there's a zoning change. So does that, I thought maybe that distinction would help if it was made from a legal standpoint instead of from our zoning experts. Questions?
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So in a specific case, and I think we have to be careful by saying that property values go down with density adjacent to it, because I don't think that's a proven or accepted policy, or that's been proven out in fact. I think the opposite is in fact the case. So we got to be careful with that. In a case in which a zoning gets implemented, that's always going to be the injury, right? That's going to be the claim, is that you have reduced my property value, because it's hard to prove anything else. But yeah, that's the easiest one to claim. How would somebody appeal that? Because that's what we're talking about, is bringing it back and appealing it to the council. How would an aggrieved party be dealt with under that scenario, where they don't like the zoning that was put next to them, so they want to appeal? What are the measures specifically that they would have to check in that instance to get to the council to have a full hearing with the council?
Councilmember Aspen Leiter, I will first clarify to say I used the example of property values just as an example, not making any policy statements, which is not my job. So I didn't mean that. As far as your question, I think it's a good one. Distinguishing between who's an aggrieved party and who's in the notice area that's entitled to come in and tell you what they think is your constituents and how they want you to vote. If we have a zoning area that allows for triplexes, fourplexes, and duplexes, I'm going to try to give a specific example here, but it's undeveloped. If a developer comes in and puts in a permit and wants to build all triplexes, that is technically allowed under the map. People within the notice requirements can write written comments in order to give their 2 cents on that. That might affect my property value. I don't like it for any certain reason. If there is someone who can prove that that would cause a specific injury, so a real cognizable injury, not just speculative, because you're right, possible property value changes are not enough for a aggrieved party. Only people with an actual or likely injury are able to appeal as an aggrieved party.
Just
Gotcha.
I think I understand what you're asking, and I don't want to put words in Jessica's mouth, but I think it's so broad under the context of state law that it's going to have to be navigated on a case-by-case basis with legal, is the way that I would think that we have to do it, because there is not clear guidance from the state government that I am aware of that tells me exactly what is going to be injurious at all.
I would just, we're going to get challenged on that, the very first one that we do for multifamily, the very first one. And I mean, you can take one that's coming in the pipeline for us right now that they're talking about already. I would encourage us to be prepared with a set of what we think are reasonable injuries, if that's what we're going to call it, to be able to navigate that and bat that down. Because the very first time we do this, we're going to get challenged that way. And somebody's going to try to appeal, and you're going to say, no, that doesn't qualify. And they're going to say, well, what the hell qualifies?
And Councilmember Aspen Leiter, I agree with Anna and with you that the language is vague. And the vagueness lies in a likely injury will be caused by the action. We know, what I can say for certain on a legal ground is that it's not speculative. Likely to happen doesn't mean speculative. So I think as legal, we can navigate that. But I think flagging the issue is a good point.
And if I can just also add that the applicant or the aggrieved party, I think Jessica stole one of my sheets here, so I don't have the right language, but the aggrieved person who's making the appeal does have the burden of proof in these appeals. They have to prove, they have to, when they submit their appeal, they have to state the facts, raise all the grounds for appeal that the party may raise in district court. So they have to do that up front from the beginning. They have to be very specific, specific about what their alleged, their claimed injury is. So legal would definitely be an assistance from the beginning to help with that. They have that huge burden right up front.
Councilmember Neese, then Ms. Aguirre, and then Ms. No? Oh, then Andy. Okay, we can do it in that order.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Mayor. Just another quick question about aggrieved party. Let's say I was the developer. I submit the permit in the example you gave, and the map says that what I submitted should be approved, right? Administratively approved, but it's denied. Maybe because of all of, whatever the case might be. In that scenario, am I now the aggrieved party as the developer whose application was denied when I think that it should have been approved? And I think in that case, probably I have a better call for injury.
Yeah, Councilmember Lindley, I think that's a good question. The distinction here is if you are denied issuance of a permit under the current zoning ordinance, the existing structure to appeal that would be in place. Is that correct? You can appeal the denial and state the reasons why you think it's unfair to is it the Planning Commission? That's the board.
So essentially, yes, they would appeal it to the Planning Commission, but we would also, before staff would deny anything, if it were in alignment with the plan, if we've determined that there is a necessity for additional information, we have to go back to the applicant and request additional information so that we can try to mitigate some of our concerns. So it's not an outright denial. We have to give the applicant a chance to give us, what their impacts are going to be, or provide some studies about how they're going to mitigate an impact that we've identified that might be outside of what the plan is as well. So in that case that you've described, the injurious party, if all of that has been done and we've still determined denial, yes, they would be the injurious party, and yes, they would go through the same process as anyone else would for an appeal.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Nicholson?
So would blocking somebody's view of the Beartooth Mountains count as an injury, or would shading somebody's solar panels be an injury?
I am a litigator generally and appear before courts. I won't give a legal opinion on that. It does say reasonably likely to cause basically a cognizable injury. So if there is some way you can show that that's an actual injury, maybe. And I know that's an unsatisfying answer. It probably will be litigated, and then we will know for sure. But I don't want to talk out of school and give predictions on the record.
Smart. Okay, Mr. Neese?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. And so if I understand correctly, this is really similar to what I originally had stated, and then you guys looked into it, is they're really the only ones who are going to be injured is the developer for the most part, because it's very difficult or impossible. I agree. You cannot predict. This is what I say. Anytime there's a zoning thing, when it comes to value of your home, the traffic, some of these things, that just doesn't matter because the city is going to take care of that. You can't prove some of these things. So those are not things that we typically consider because there's just no substantial proof. And so other things that we can consider with whether or not it fits in the character of the neighborhood, it does this or does that. There's some of those other things we can. And so the injurious party, being the neighbor, saying they don't think it's going to fit the character of the neighborhood or whatever else they may come up with, all they do is they appeal it to the staff, and then the staff is the one who determines whether or not that is a valid appeal or not to go to the council or to the zoning commission, or if it doesn't, then that resident is done. It never ever comes to council. So staff is not only making the decision of, yes, Mr. Developer, you can put this building in here, and no, Mr. Resident, you can, that doesn't qualify as an appeal. We're still going to do what the developer said. Do I understand that correctly?
Council Member Neese, I'm going to try to answer your question in a few parts. The first is, no, I cannot say that the developer will be the only aggrieved party.
Okay, you're
we
correct.
as
Only is too much of a strong word. I apologize.
we have. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. In interpreting statutes as a municipality, it's our job to give meaning to the statutory language. So we can't say that likely to cause harm or actually injured does cause harm. I would say there could be an example where a proposed use that fits in the statute would actually cause a diminished property value, but that would have to be an actual appraisal. So practically speaking, the planning division will consider all the factors. We'll try to work with developers and make each side, make sure that we are doing our best to comply with the law and also public perception. I know that is an evasive answer. Did I answer your question, kind of?
Well, you did, because I was being too overgeneralizing. I apologize. But if the staff gets the information from the resident and says, no, I don't agree with that, then there is no appeal process for them. However, if the developer gets a no from the staff person, then there is an appeal process, forward. So that's where I'm trying. It seems to me like we're not giving the public that, when we give a 15-day notice, which I have another question about, but a 15-day notice to provide comment, it's really all it is comment. It really doesn't have the same thing as a council member or the council member deciding it, because now the staff is deciding it based upon what we did on the map.
I do understand your question now. Thank you for clarifying. Your question is, are the written comments meaningless because you can never prove you're aggrieved? And the answer to that is no. A person who is in the notice area can write a written comment and prove that they not only object to it, but they are also aggrieved. And that would be that the proposed development is next door to me, and here is why it shouldn't be put into place. The staff then reviews it and will take into consideration if, in fact, the staff grants the permit and that's put in, it's granted and it's built or proposed to be built, that person can then be an aggrieved party as well. So you're an aggrieved party at both steps, then they can appeal. So the remedy for that would be to appeal.
Oh, I see. So if the staff still says, yes, you can build it, and denies the thing, then the neighbor or whatever would appeal to, what's the process? Appeal to the planning department, and then they send the whole project to the zoning commission?
Correct. And that is essentially what is in place now.
Okay, so this is concerning to me in the sense that now we're back to what Scott was saying earlier about that anyone who appeals, anyone who objects to a project, and let's say that the staff says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and move it forward, but yet now they can appeal that project to the zoning commission and go through the whole process again, which I don't think is a real great way to develop.
But they can only appeal successfully if they fit into the definition of aggrieved party. So anyone can try to do anything, but that would only be successful in the case that they can prove a likely, cognizable, actual.
And who's going to determine that they're a aggrieved party?
First of all, the planning commission would determine it.
We just said that if the planning commission says they're not and they tell the developer move forward, then that person who says that they're aggrieved, then they could appeal. And so I'm not sure if I understand. So are you saying that the comments come in,
mm-hmm.
and the person looks at it and says, nope, they're not an aggrieved party, and Mr. Developer, you can go forward. But then you said once the planning just approves it, now they're aggrieved, but then now the planning is also going to decide, no, you're not aggrieved after they appeal it?
And Councilmember Neese, it is confusing objectively. So I'm going to try to walk it through again, and you can tell me if this clarifies. There's a 15-day notice public comment period before the planning division takes action to approve proposed development under the existing code. After those 15 days, the division looks at all those comments and sees if any of them are valid objections to granting the permit under the law. If they decide to go ahead and grant it, an individual person who is an aggrieved party, who thinks that they're an aggrieved party, can go to the planning commission and appeal that. During an appeal, it's put on hold, correct? The permit application granting is put on hold. The planning commission then looks, under this statute, they have to be aggrieved for us to grant the appeal. Are they aggrieved or not? If they are, the appeal is granted. If they're not, they deny it. If the person who's aggrieved still thinks there is a problem, they go to the zoning commission, or they file a lawsuit at that point? they go to the city council, and then you can decide, and then there could be eventual litigation where the city would be sued.
So it sounds to me like this could be, the whole process could be slowed up even further with the residents who are objecting to a project next to them, because they're eventually going to continue to object to it, which will object to, then finally come to the city council to have to make that decision.
So let me make a suggestion, because we're getting down to our last hour and 19 minutes here. How about a flow chart? Could you make a flow chart of yes, no, maybe so kind of thing, and then send it out to us so we can all
Mayor
have
Nelson, I
visual?
love a flow chart. Would be happy to do that.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Good?
I like it.
All right,
Yeah,
let's get
I
a flow
like it.
chart.
Thank you.
Okey doke. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice. Councilmember Boyette.
So Wyatt, the state's requiring us to do all this. Let's say we don't do 5, we do 4, and let's say we're in June instead of May. What's the ramifications? Is the state going to slap our hand or just say nothing? What happens if we don't do all of this stuff?
Councilmember Boyette and Mayor and Council, and I'll defer to, because we've had this conversation with city legal in terms of their interpretation of the statutes that says by May 17th we have to have our the new code in place. I can't tell you exactly what, like, the next day something's going to happen, but we would be out of compliance with state statute, and the legislature, or potentially, and I'd rather have Jessica or Gina chime in, someone else could challenge that and say the city is not in compliance with the state law per the statute, and then we could be, I suppose, taken to court or something to be made to do it. Well, maybe, yeah. I guess that's I'd rather have legal chime in, but yeah, I mean, the potential risk there is that yes, we would be told to get into compliance, and yes, that takes time. But
I think from my perspective, if I can jump in, if one of my clients got an approval during this period in which we are technically out of compliance, I think the uncertainty on the development community is huge, because now a community member could say, well, you approved something under a policy that was not in compliance with state law, and you have to go back and redo it after the developer got the approval and started building something, and now could possibly come back and have all of that stripped away after he had made significant and serious capital improvements in place. I think exactly that. If a decision got made for a client of mine, it throws into question the legality of whether that was done properly or not, and it may bring all of that into question. So for the development community, like, that's what I think the risk is. For the city, I don't know, but for the development community, I think it's a big risk.
Well, I
Pittman.
mean, I think those are the same risks to the city, just in the inverse, Councilmember Wyatt. So it sounds like we're assuming we're not going to be in compliance, but this is our effort to get to be into compliance, so we don't have to face those issues.
We're going to make it. Go ahead, Mr. Pittman.
So when we started this process, we weren't going to go over like 5. We were going to stay at the minimum. I think we're at 8 of them now. I was wondering if we could revisit A for a little bit, because there was some confusion, I think, within the council. We kind of had almost a split vote. It was pretty close. But as I was looking at this, it kind of refers back to it was not correctly added and it remains an incentive. Could you kind of go over that again for us?
Sure. When this bill was passed in 2023, the legislature that carried it carried the revisions only under what we currently operate for as state law. So not under what we need to comply with, which is the Montana Land Use Planning Act. So it remains an incentive option for us to choose as a community. So right now we have to follow this law because we are currently operating under 76 Part 2, 300 is what we call for zoning. In the future, in May, we have to go under operating 76 Part 25 is how we'll operate as a community, and that's the Montana Land Use Planning Act. Because the bill only applied to what we are currently under, we could tentatively not choose this as an incentive for the community. So we could have just single family zoning once we adopt the Billings 2045.
Anna, if you don't mind, Mayor, Anna,
Hold on, there's a couple people in front of you. So it'll be Mr. Nicholson, Mr. Kennedy, then Mr. Neese. Then Mr. Kennedy. Thank you, sir.
I just would say, I know it's gonna go, it's, item C, but I just want to go on record that I'm opposed to it. And the other is, Deputy Mayor, if we're out of compliance, the rule is they put the deputy mayor in jail.
Oh, looks like we're not going to be in compliance. Mr. Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Anna, when you mentioned about this single family option, I think I want to make sure we understand. There's only N3 is the only single family option. Everything else is multifamily in one way or another, correct? And so this is only if we decide not to choose this one, it's only impacting N3 property, which still potentially has options for ADUs anyway, depending on the covenants. And so this would have probably not a lot of impact on the city, but because a lot of people say you don't see a lot of townhomes and multifamilies being built in N3 property anyway. So do you have any idea how many N3 properties there are, what percentage of properties are N3?
No, but I can certainly find out and get back to you at
Okay.
our next session.
Yeah, so I think that by just making sure we understand this, by not adopting this, it really doesn't impact very much of our properties that's already zoned, if I understand that correctly, and I don't know if you can agree with that or not.
It essentially, in my mind, the way that this would work is it allows an option for a developer to choose. I mean, a developer can choose single family zoning or to build single family in the zoning as is right now.
Right.
All it does is provide some predictability if a developer were to choose N3 to the neighbors that you would have single family being built there. That would be the only addition that would happen there, is instead of saying it could be single family or it could be duplex, you know for certain that this will be single family.
Yeah, so it's predictability for anyone buying homes in N3 zone, knowing they're always going to be single family homes in that zone.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I think we're it. So
Do we need to have redirection associated with this one?
no, I think we're good.
Okay.
We're still good.
So is there, I would like us to reconsider that. I guess, I think there has to be some time where we draw a line and say these are just single family houses and not, or maybe something else. So I would like it reconsidered. Make
Any
a
comment
motion.
on that?
Do I need to make a motion to reconsider that?
You can if you want.
I'll make a motion to reconsider it.
Okay. We have that in a second. So let's have some conversation. Mr. Lindley?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, well, first of all, we had some good conversation about this since the last time that we met. And I had some time to kind of think about it myself. So I guess I just wanted to share. So before my viewpoint on this, before my wife and I bought our first house, we lived in 2 different duplexes. I don't know what the zoning was, but our neighbors were single family homes. I think we were pretty good neighbors. I've lived in neighborhoods where there are duplexes. I don't quite understand the desire to get rid of this one because, as Councilmember Aspenleiter said, there's no good studies that show property value decreases. I mean, I think triplexes and fourplexes and bigger than that, I can understand it's a lot different view, but I don't see the reason to get rid of the ability to have duplexes. So that's just my thoughts.
Ms. Aguirre?
Thank you. I would echo what Councilmember Lindley just said and just add that having options for diversity in a neighborhood is always a beautiful thing.
Mr. Neese and then Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Andrew on this as far as the ability to have some mixed use, single families and duplexes and that. And because that's actually what our code does. That's what N2 and 3 does. It actually provides that ability. And that's one of the things the beauty of Recode was that it took a lot of these R properties that were all single family homes that probably was the majority of the code. And we made them multi-family type projects. So you can have those mixed use like you probably lived in. And so, and chances are there probably was an N2 or N3 property that you were staying. And so the idea to say, well, this is single family gives predictability both to developers and to the residents to say, yes, this is a neighborhood that is going to be single family and it'll always be there. It doesn't impact the fact that people can still build in probably the majority of the properties in the city with a mixed use of townhomes and single family homes mixed side by side together. This just sets apart the side that the single family is going to be single family. So I don't think it's injurious to the city and the growth and how much we have to grow to meet this Malupa map, because that's what we're all about, is making sure we have so many houses built. I think we see very little of that anyway in N3. This is just giving more predictability to those who are existing in N3 now to stay that way.
All these regulations are designed to increase housing, which Billings needs. The estimate in the what is it called? Well, anyway, the economic plan shows that we're 10,000 units behind right now, and every year we're another 13,000 units behind, according to the Billings area realtors. This is an easy way to increase housing. The other thing too is that you need to think about people's private property rights, the ability to do what they want to do with their land. And if they want to do a duplex, I think we should be careful about saying, no, you can't do that with your land.
Any other comments? All right. Council Member Pittman, you want to restate what your motion was so that we can offer some guidance?
Yep, so I'll ask that we reconsider approving this, and I guess that's the simplest way to do it. Last time we approved going forward with this, so I would motion that we not approve it. There, we'll make it simple.
Yeah, that makes it simpler. So we don't really need a second since this is a work session. You guys ready to vote? All right, all in favor of Council Members Kennedy's knocking this off the list, please indicate by
Pittman. Whatever.
Well, at least I didn't call you Commissioner. All right, all in favor of Councilmember Pittman's motion to knock this off the list, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please raise your hand. We have 4 to 6. There's 10 of us. Okay, so it passes. We will not allow as a permitted use for at least a duplex for a single unit dwelling is permitted. All right, anything else from the council? All right, we're ready for you guys again.
Do you want to go over the noticing stuff? So we also want to circle back to the noticing requirements that are happening for the 15 days. I'll pull that up on the screen. Sorry, I didn't. All right. So this is the process under the Montana Land Use Planning Act. You've all seen this many times before. The public has the 15 business days to comment. Where we have an option as a community is right now, whenever we have a zone change that's happening, we notice a certain distance from the property that the zone change is happening. And that's outlined within our code. So depending on the type of application that's coming in, we notice if it's a variance, 150 feet. If it's a zone change, 300 feet. If it's a zone change that's on the outskirts of the city, it's 1,250 feet. So there's these different noticing requirements that we have. For subdivisions, it's adjacent property owners, and that's by law. We have the opportunity as a community to evaluate this and carry that forward. There is nothing defined as to what we have to notice during that 15 comment business day for public comment. So it could be exactly what we have right now. It could be that we transition to adjacent properties, or we could slightly change it. With that being said, I just wanted to circle back to that so that I answered, I believe it was Councilmember Neese's question associated with this.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilman Neese.
All right, so in essence, currently we're at, if I wrote it down right, 300 feet if it's a zone change request from the edge of the property to the.
That's correct. We make a radius map associated with it going from the edge of the property out 300 feet in all directions.
From the actual zone change area.
Correct.
Okay. I guess my recommendation is keep it the way it is, if that's what we're doing. I guess the only question is that I think today does the applicant send out the notices, and with this new law, will the city be now sending out the notices?
The city will be, so it's both right now. The applicant holds a neighborhood meeting, which would be not part of the process under the Montana Land Use Planning Act. And then the city then provides a notice to the adjacent properties about the hearing date. We would be providing the notice associated with this is your 15 days to comment with this zone change application.
And is that notice delivered to the addresses around the 300 property, or are we talking just a public notice in the newspaper?
It's both. We have a notice in the newspaper, and then we have it within the 300 feet. It's an actual postcard that's delivered.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. That's what we're doing today. I recommend we keep it.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, we have a recommendation to staff that we keep communication the way it is. Are we in sync with that one? Okay.
Sorry for making you dizzy by skipping around here. Just close your eyes. I'll tell you when we get there. Okay, I'll turn it over to Wyeth, who's going to talk about the economic analysis.
All right, thanks, Mayor and Council. We'll walk you through the analysis we sent out to you with this work session on Friday. This is an analysis that SB Friedman, which is our economic analysis consultant that's working with Orion Planning and Design on this project, completed for us regarding looking at the entire city and some of the high points regarding market growth projections, et cetera. I'm going to go through a sort of an abbreviated version of the information, and the caveat I'll give you is obviously we don't have our consultant SB Friedman here today, so if there's questions that we're not able to answer, we're happy to follow up and get those back to you. They presented last week to the Interim Planning Commission with this presentation, and then that's when we shared the initial analysis that you got on Friday as well. So this was our team, Lance and Michael, who've been working through this and working with Orion Planning and Design as we've developed the analysis and helping to inform the overall land use planning effort. So you've seen this before, but just want to call your attention to it again, that what our estimates are for population for till 2045 is that we'll add approximately 30,000 more people to the city of Billings. We will add approximately a little over 16,000 housing units, and we will add approximately almost 23,000 jobs. And just to clarify too, that CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate, is what's used. You'll see that referenced a lot in the document, and that's to kind of both basically normalize information across different years and such. So it's trying to give you a good estimate out there, and that's where those percentages are coming from. So talking about population, just to give you a little snapshot on some of this that if you saw in the analysis. So the growth from 2010 to 2020, what we've seen is a little over 12% growth, but it wasn't distributed evenly. What you'll see here is that a lot of the highest growth areas were out on the edges of the city, West Billings and the Heights. We also saw a lot of growth out in our annexation area outside the city. So basically seeing that we're we've seen a lot of edge activity and growth versus kind of the discussion you've been having regarding infill and more development into the internal part of the city. Just a little bit on building permits. The kind of big takeaway here is that we have seen more recently more denser building activity than in the past. So if you look at that 2015 to 2020 and then that 2021 to 2025, you'll see single family has continued to be pretty high, but you'll see the 2-family, the townhomes, and multifamily have increased significantly. And you certainly, in the last probably 8 years, seen a lot of the larger multifamily happen. But there's been some smaller construction in that area as well. But that has gone up from what we've seen in the past. Looking at multifamily information, and actually, you know what? Sorry, I want to go back to this just for a second. I had a note that I just forgot to mention. One thing that has come up and is a discussion when we talk about different housing choices is that I think when you see the townhome section there, and you see we went up a little bit there, that has been a conversation in terms of that type of development, and kind of to Councilmember Nicholson's question on the missing middle. Because often those can be rental or prop ownership, and we could definitely afford to see more of that type of development, especially on the ownership side, to help between the multifamily, more rental oriented, and some of the more conventional single family development. That there's an opportunity there. So just wanted to mention that. That's sort of the 2 to 4 unit attached area, and for affordability and ownership, that is a good focus. Switching over to multifamily, what we've seen is more sort of edge high density housing, and that kind of goes to when you drive around, what you see, things like Shiloh Commons, to some extent the Zimmerman development, that's not right out on the edge, but out there, and then also some of the development down, obviously at King Avenue and Shiloh, in terms of the high density that's happened out there. However, we have also seen some really great infill potential areas for housing that are coming forward or will be coming forward soon. A couple examples would be the Elks property on Lewis, the Yagan property south of Grand, and east of Zimmerman Trail, areas around Stewart Park, and then also up along Main Street in the Heights and the eBird. So there are some great areas to see more of that occur, and it would fit well with the areas that those are located in.
Hold on just a second. Go ahead, Mr. Boyette.
So when you build these great big buildings, the public that I talk with don't want them. But is there any relationship between the problems we have in the city for traffic, sewer, water, police, fire, when we start putting these large multifamily units in versus single family? Do we see any relationship in our costs going up because of that?
Councilmember Boyette and Mayor and Council, I guess my understanding from hearing from law enforcement and fire and such, as well as with utilities, is that the advantage of putting higher density or development where we already have all those services occurring, whether it's stuff in the ground like the utilities or where the police and fire are already present, that is a better return and less expensive than putting them in areas where we aren't, or we're on the edge and then we have to extend services, or we're trying to cover it with public safety. So I haven't heard that there's an issue because of those types of developments. It's more of that the location is more advantageous in those areas. So a little bit more on the housing piece overall. The median sales price, as we know, is high. You've seen this stat before, but it went up $163,000 in the 10 years from 2015 to 2025. So that was actually the increase, not the house price, which is substantial and is a challenge clearly that we're continuing to work through in this community. And that's where that sort of diversity of housing types that you were talking about earlier, and with those incentives, helps, where we can see some more mix, where we can then see a bigger range both of unit housing types and then also housing, the costs of that housing. And then, like we've already talked to, like I just was talking with Councilmember Boyette's question, utilizing those existing utilities and service areas also helps with those costs as well. So changing gears here a little bit into the trade clusters, the actual different business types that we have in the community. This breaks out the 10 top ones that we have in Billings. Hospitality and tourism are on top, followed by healthcare. And I think this is really interesting because if you look on this, the agricultural inputs and services are there. They're on the top 10, but we're definitely, many years ago, that would have been a lot higher up. And what we're seeing is that the hospitality and tourism and healthcare and some other items have moved up into those top bracket spots. Another thing to note is that the salaries in about 7 of those top sectors get into the area of being able to, you're getting either in or you're closer to affordability of a home or a housing unit, which is encouraging. It's not perfect, but if you look at some of those wages, at least you see that in those areas, and then you can see based on this where those growth areas are going to be and what's been happening in the past. So there's definitely more coming in those top areas, but across those 10, we see some good salary levels going forward that could be helpful. Just a couple of snapshots on specific sectors. So industrial supply, I think an important thing to note here is that the majority of the industrial square footage that's been done was done quite a few years back. And we've added about 700,000 square feet since 2015, which is only 9% of the inventory. So everything else that's happened has been previous to that. So we've got quite a bit, but that is an area when you look in the analysis that's continuing to be in demand and will continue to grow, actually more so than office and space, which you'll see in a second here. But that's kind of a takeaway here is that we have a demand, there's continuing to be one, and we definitely need to be looking at what's available as we go forward for more of that type of use to be allowed. Going to office, we have an aged office square footage or the available office space kind of situation in Billings. 98% of the office space that has been built was before 2015. And as you look in this analysis, you'll see that office demand is not going to be, it's pretty flat to less going forward, but we're not seeing that. And I think a lot of that, there's sort of two things hearing from the real estate community on this as well. One is obviously we have since COVID and all, we've got different models of use for office space. We have people working remote, either all or part of the time, different arrangements with how that space is being used. But you also see a lot of our office space is also older and needs to be updated. So it's not just, we have some capacity, but people are not necessarily renting some of the space because it needs to be, it's not Class A office, it's something less than that. Sometimes from the 80s, 90s, it hasn't been updated. So I think we've got sort of two different things going on there, but definitely you'll see that as pretty flat going forward. Not a huge, a big demand there. Switching over to retail briefly, again, looking at the retail, Billings is kind of interesting in this area. We've had limited space built since 2015, but it also in Billings continues to be a sort of important and sort of steady gradual growth of demand. I think one of the things that we've noticed, and from talking with folks around the community as well as with SB Friedman, is that because we're a regional center and we're isolated in the sense that we're not a bedroom community to a Denver or something, the retail interest and activity here continues to be a little bit higher than you might find in some other communities because we have this very large population that comes into the city to do business, to buy things, to shop, and they expect and go to those brick and mortar type facility or businesses. So I think we see that a little bit differently. And I think that even goes to when you've seen some of the closures of national chains where Billings sometimes our store or stores stays open because they're still doing really well here differently than maybe in some other areas of the country. So anyway, it's there. It's not as, again, the industrial is the top kind of growth here, but the retail is significant going forward as well. In terms of economic development, I mentioned this a little bit on that other slide, but 8 of the 10 largest trade employment clusters, those different like healthcare, hospitality, et cetera, are projected to grow in the next 10 years. The reason this goes to 2034 in this analysis is that was the data that SB Friedman was able to pull. We couldn't get out in front to 2045 well, but we at least were able to look at that. But those are projected to continue with growth. Like I said, industrial continues to be strong. And then the other areas, like I already mentioned, the office and retail a little bit differently there. But we're seeing those sectors being steady and moving things ahead in the community. And just in terms of kind of a quick look at the conclusions here, talking about all the different areas. So the housing, again, looking at, the diversity of housing types would help us in terms of both affordability and accessibility, and also our infrastructure costs as we go forward. I probably haven't heard me this whole time. The industrial, again, strong, office, weaker, and then the retail continues to be more growth there, given again our location and our service area the capture area that we have. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions. Like I said, we can follow up if there's things we aren't able to answer, and hopefully you've had a chance or you'll get a chance to go through the report in more depth. Thanks.
Mr. Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to your previous comments about where if people are being built next to where our services are at, I've heard this before, but would it behoove us to have a moratorium on annexing property for 5 years? Wouldn't that encourage infill growth and use the facilities we have rather than extending farther and farther west and north when all that does is cost us more money versus filling in the land that we have?
Councilmember Boyette and Mayor and Council, that's a great question. I think what we would recommend is to do sort of a balance there. I think, yes, to some extent, we have quite a bit of property, and our analysis of this is showing that. If you look at our current city limits and you look at the zoning in there and you look at our along the edge with our annexation area, we have the ability to accommodate a lot of development, as we are now within the city and maybe just a little bit on the edge. So I would say, I don't know if my experience looking at other places where they set a hard growth boundary have not all worked out the way that they were hoping. It creates some other dynamics when you just drop the door, so to speak. But I think, yes, your focus more so on the areas that you already have services to that are in the city or in that edge area, in some cases is a great way to approach this, because you can then realize more of the value from your infrastructure.
Mr. Neese and Mr. Aspenleiter.
Thank you, Mayor. As you've shown some of these maps, I noticed, industrial and commercial, I think it was really aligned near the major freeways, the tracks, a little bit Highway 3. And so when we look at knowing some of that stuff, when we look at the map, we're going to making sure that this is what we're using this for, is to help make sure that we have good industrial, that any of that zoning in there can be developed for industrial and stuff like that. Does I understand that correctly? So this is kind of helping us to determine how that map should develop.
Councilmember Neese, yes, I believe, if I'm understanding you right, yes, that would be correct. We're looking at both where we have existing industrial development as an example, and then, where else, or is there areas in those locations where we might be able to expand and increase more?
And we don't build the railroads or the freeways and highways and stuff like that, but we do build arterials, which I noticed that's where a lot of the retail was focused, along those other retails. And so, again, that map, we're going to want to determine where are those future retails are going to be, make sure we plan appropriately in 2045. This is where we want these retail nodes to be showing up. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, Councilmember Neese, yep, that's correct. And actually, your note on we're looking very much so at the node, kind of nodal development, both on a larger scale and smaller neighborhood or neighborhood sort of area scale, because that gets back to the comments regarding people having a closer, shorter distance to go for sort of their more basic services, things they might need daily versus the larger nodes or areas where you might have a bigger retail, presence, and you're talking about people are coming there for shopping from a larger area, like a Costco area, and as an example, versus something where you might have like up at Reberg and Grand, or even down to like, a Poly Food Basket or a smaller place like that.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Aspenleiter.
I maybe kick this back to City Administrator Kukulski, who I think had his hand up regarding Councilman Boyette's comment.
So a couple of things I would add, Deputy Mayor, and Council, is it sounded like in your question, Deputy Mayor, the assumption is that if you're building on the outskirts, that we're going to lose money on all those projects per se on our ROI. I think that's overgeneralizing. It also may be the case that depending upon the subdivision or the activity, that there's not a lot of calls for 911 services. They are paying their utility bills that are covering their cost, all those things, et cetera. That's not to say infill isn't important. I think ideally we would see more infill, but what I have seen over the past 27 years, you have to have a lockstep approach with the county if you're going to have a big impact, because if you say no more development on the edges, we're going to do everything in infill, and the county keeps approving the projects just outside the city, now they're using all your services and not paying anything for them. So that is critically important, what we do regionally, not just within the city limits.
And I would tag on to that in that we have bigger problems in the West Valley. DNRC is already threatening to stop issuing water rights for county subdivisions because that area between Canyon Creek and the Big Ditch is dewatering. We're losing water in Canyon Creek. It's a losing watershed now. And so we are building infrastructure on the west side of the city. We just built a water plant there. We're going to be running a water line up 48th to Grand Avenue. We are setting ourselves up to supplement and support the growth that's happening in our community. From an infill policy standpoint, I would much rather take the approach of incentivizing infill than trying to shut annexation off in order to drive infill, because the only thing that's going to happen there is the people that own the land that have infill capacity, that land is going to double in value because now that's the only land you can buy. So it's completely counter to actual affordability in our city. We just, as a government, drove the cost up by shutting the door and minimizing the options for developers and builders. I think it's important to note, as development goes, development pays for its infrastructure to get out there. It doesn't cost the city to pay to build roads, water, and sewer. The developer has to pay for that and build it. So, they're paying their fair share. Do we need to be smart about it? Yes. But you don't have to look much further than Central to see what the city administrator is talking about happened. Central has essentially neutered city's growth past 48th. There's so many county subdivisions that are out there. We almost can't grow as a city past 48th without taking over those county subdivisions, and that's only going to happen when their systems fail. So we've got to be careful about how we're looking at that, because we could inadvertently neuter ourselves from being able to grow at all as a city.
Mr. Pittman.
Actually, thank you. That was a lot of what I was just about to say. We've tried this before, and it just pushes subdivisions into the county that then at some point those systems are going to fail and they're going to have to be part of the city anyway. What I want to do is point out to this market analysis. This is a great tool for our entire community, whether it be the chamber, the Big Sky EDA, or even the Builders Association, that we are a growing community. There is some predictability in what our needs and our demands are. We've done a survey. We can actually go out and tell our community we are growing. We are looking at the needs. We know what our deficiencies are and able to focus on them that way. So this is a great presentation. Thank you.
Just two comments. One is what Scott had just said. When I was on the county commission, we saw a lot of subdivisions that were out there. And when Yellowstone Country Club and Briarwood finally came in, the city of Billings ended up paying for those annexations until you had enough people in those subdivisions to actually pay for the whole thing. And so what happens is you're going to have people still do subdivisions in the county. And then 10 years from now, it's going to come back and it's going to cost us more dollars. So I would not want to look at a moratorium, but I would look at the idea of the infill, like Scott said. And that brings up my point of looking at your office space. If we have all of this office space and we have, it needs to be updated, why don't you start converting it into housing? Because they're in areas, you want to get housing in every area. So why don't we incentivize the people that own these office buildings to upgrade and start putting housing in them? Because you'd probably get more people biting on that than you would of just leaving the office space empty.
I think that's a great point, and I would 100% agree with you, and we can certainly navigate how to incentivize that as part of the infill policy as well.
All right. Next.
Before we go to the next item, I just want to say the entire plan that we sent to you all is on billings2045.com. So if the public isn't aware of how to access the agenda, it's billings2045.com, has all presentations that we've done to City Council so far and to the Interim Planning Commission. And we will continue to post things there as we've completed them with the governing body that looks at them. And we will be having Planning Week, April 6th through the 8th again. So I'm just plugging that so that I can say that I'm trying to get the word out. And we will release where those locations are as soon as we have them.
All right, we'll switch to our last item for you today. And this is mostly just to get this into your hands and to be thinking about this, because what the next piece that follows this land use designation chart is the draft future land use map, which is coming here very soon. But wanted to just speak to these briefly, and we did print out handouts for you because we were concerned about everything fitting on the screen and being able to see what's on the screen. But basically what you have is on the left-hand column is all the zoning districts that exist, and specifically a few county, but mostly the rest are all city. And then going across those colors are the proposed land use categories for the future land use map. And this goes back to the discussion, we had some of this with you on Thursday, which is the way we're supposed to develop our plan and map going forward so that this can go through administrative process and there can be certainty both for development community and residents and property owners, is that each of these categories has several zoning districts that are in them. And the idea here is to be able to map the community so that in these areas, like for example, the urban residential, the purple, which allows for some of the N districts, N2, N1, and then into some NXs and RMH, you can see there. And then also the office, this is more of the neighborhood office, neighborhood retail, those categories. So an area of the city that's mapped this way, someone could come in and propose one of these zonings on a property, and we would review it. And then they could potentially, that could be approved and they could do a development within that category. And so when you look at these, it's important to just be thinking through, okay, these are the category, or the zoning districts within each of these categories, so that when you see the map, it'll start to kind of click. It's really important to point out that the categories show the districts. But then if I'm coming in to do a project and I have a zoning that I'm working with, all of our zoning regulations as they are right now apply. So you still have to do all the requirements that you would have, that you do now under zoning. That does not change. So as an example, like where you may have a category, or we have a category, urban residential mix, where you can get into the CMU1 and commercial district. Well, we still have requirements for distance for those, where that can be, and arterials and requirements like that. Those all still apply. So it doesn't mean that just because you see an area of the city that's mapped urban residential mix, that I can plunk down the CMU1 anywhere I want. You still have to follow those sub requirements that are within the zoning code. But it gives that idea and area of like, okay, within this area of the city, these are the kind of zonings and uses that we would expect going forward. Does not change the current zoning either. This would be if I come in and I want to change the zoning, or I'm just developing with the zoning that I have, we would look at this map based on what's been approved by the council, and then use that for that guidance. So just wanted to get that out and like I said, have you guys look at that. You see the districts, you see where they fall, you see the way it's purposely kind of tiers down from very, county rural, which is, like I said, only a couple of districts, into the initial residential, into some mixed residential, some neighborhood type services, into more intense, into nodes like we've talked about, and then on from there. And then at the far right, you have open space and public institutions. So you'll see schools and parks and things like that are going to fall into those categories, other public facilities and such, versus the commercial and then like employment industrial, where you're going to see that in the very heavier industrial areas. So is there anything I'm missing to add, Anna, just to introduce this?
On the far left, you'll see rural residential and agriculture in county neighborhoods. Those are not items that we will typically see. We're not going to see them within the city, really. The reason that you have them here in the future land use designations is the West End plan will eventually be coming in front of you. All of the plans will have the same future land use designations. There are items that are outside of the city's annexation area that are included in the West End plan because they were part of a transportation study. So we had to be able to give a designation to those parcels, but just understanding that rural residential and agriculture and county neighborhoods are items that are designated because they are included in that West End plan, really, and not items that would necessarily come into the city at this point.
So we're happy to answer any questions today. And then, like I said, this is to get you looking at this so that when we bring the map forward, you'll be able to connect these together and understand kind of how things are going to work together.
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
I just have one. If you look at P1, Parks and Open Space, and you have P over there, as we're talking about the country club, all of the golf courses and stuff are considered P1, correct?
Correct.
Because that's how they're designated for taxes. So if you have this, you say parks and open space, are they considered? They're a private entity. It's not parkland. It's land that belongs to them. So I'm a little confused because we have a lot of letters coming in of people saying, well, the designation is parkland. Well, it really isn't. It's just the taxation designation of that property. So how do you clear that up with this?
That's a tough item to navigate. Just full disclosure, it really is, because in instances, and you'll see this on the map because we're working through that right now, in instances where we are aware that something may be annexed or there is a desire to annex an item, we're trying to go ahead and give a category associated with it. We as a community are not going to get everything perfect. And in this case, it's almost great that they're coming in front of us before this map. I think we'll have to continue to navigate that. I mean, there's no way to get it perfect. Like, we don't want to say the par 4 is not open space, but in the instances that you're referencing, it's tough to know what a private company is going to want to do with their open space.
Right. And there is public open space and there's private open space. And when that legislation went through in the 1980s and designated all of the in the city, the designation would be that the golf courses would be considered parks because of the taxing on those. I think you need some qualifying notice on there because it's real confusing to the public. Because once you use a park designation, they think everything is open to the public, and it's not. And that's another battle we fought years ago, also on public and private roads, and even that they have been. I got a letter the other day that someone said prescriptive use for a trail. There is no prescriptive use for a trail in any of the statutes. There is prescriptive use for a roadway. So something just to clear it up, because the public is very confused, and just because we have an issue coming up, it's come up, but I've seen that, and when I see it here, it may cause some problems in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad Councilman Kennedy brought this up, because I was going to ask about this, because as I look through this, you know, again, this is the basis for a map, and the developers coming in and say, hey, this is what I want to do with the land. Here's my choices. And I would suspect that open space or parks would be actually in across all the categories. Because if I have if I got a plot of land, I have to dedicate some of it to open space or public parks anyway. So why, it seems to me that if it's not a choice, that means it's going to have to come to council to say, hey, we need to change the zoning from rural Route 1 and we're annexing into P1, because staff can't choose that because it's not on the map choice. So shouldn't that be P all the way across all these, so that staff can change that zoning from whatever it is to the open space the developer wants to do?
I think we can certainly do that. Part of the reason why you're seeing P and then saying primary zone is that's what we want to see, a large percentage of everything in there. So in that case where you're looking at a P&D and we need to have 98% of it fit into the urban residential mix, that 2% that is an open space, we actually wouldn't consider that out of alignment with the designation, because the primary zones have been hit accordingly. But if it's more comfortable to council to add that across all the zones, we can or across the designations, we can certainly do that as well.
I would think it would probably need to be, because the land may be already zoned. The only way to change that is through a zoning change. And if it's not already pre-approved through the map or these categories, then that particular, they're going to have all the development for PMD, and then they're going to say, oh, by the way, we need to get your approval for this little park. So I think to fit what needs to be done is, I'd have P all along, gives a developer choice.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. We can do that.
Okay. Rest of the council okay with that direction? I can see a lot of thumbs up. Okay, you go forward and do what you need to do. All right, Mr. Neese?
Now, I am just in the, I'm agreeable with the P going across the way, but I do have a lot of concern about the way the categories are spread. And so I don't want to start talking about it now unless that's the time to start talking about it.
What do you guys have planned?
You can certainly, it'd be fine to start discussing it with the time we have. I mean, in terms of the categories, because that will help at least inform us going forward. And then when you're looking at the map. So this is the last item we had specifically to talk
today.
About.
Do you intend to bring, I noticed you asked for another session. Do you intend to bring this forward then?
Correct, Mayor. Yes, we are planning to come to you on that 27th with this and the map, draft map.
This and a draft map.
Yep.
So we have, as far as scheduled and allotted time, we have 20 minutes for discussion and then the rest for public comment. So
Well, Mayor, let me just give you my few little things that I was looking at when I looked at this map.
okay.
And Wyeth, I don't know, I guess you do have the map up there. So first of all, Anna, you know this, I've mentioned this to you before. I know the first two categories, rural and you have county neighborhoods. I prefer to see that, I understand rural's gotta be county, that's all county. I prefer to see a transitional between city and county, and I'd rather have, instead of saying county neighborhoods, it'd be country neighborhoods. A little bit different in words, but the idea is this is more in the country type of living. And I would include and then N3 in that category because that gives that little bit of merger between city and county, that some of those properties that are N3 way out in the county or way far out of the city or to the edges really are maybe going to designate to stay that way. The other consideration I had is also to add N4. Now this may be outside the map, but I think it's going to have to be happen at some point, is add N4 as a city designation. And the reason I say that is just as we were talking about earlier tonight, a lot of the West End is developed in these big, large suburban neighborhoods, that are 4 acres, 5 acres, 2 acres. Eventually that water is going to run out and have to come into the city. And if we don't start planning for that now, to have the designation for these larger properties to come in through like an N4 type category, then we're going to have to be scrambling at the last minute. And so my suggestion is that instead of, again, I'm going to call it country neighborhoods, would have designations of both city and county. The rural routes and the RMFH are always going to be the county side of things, but the rest of it, I think, should be a joint city-county category. And the last thing I would change on this map is on the urban residential. Again, that's, to me, it's a lot more density. It would be, I would strike N3 out of that category. Those are the only changes I had.
So I guess I want to clarify on your point associated with the N4. Are you asking for N4 to become a city designation? Because in urban residential limited, the pink one, the lighter pink one, we have N4 as an option and then also have N3, N2, and N1. And that would be something that I think would be fitting for a county neighborhood that is being annexed into the city.
Yeah, I see some crossover there. I noticed that in the urban residential limited one. I did see some crossover there. But what I didn't agree with that crossover, although I think it's fine to have some of that gives it a little bit more city weight heaviness because you're going to have a lot of the N1 and N2 options within that same category. The difference is going to be on the N3, N4 side of things versus the N4 all the way down to N1. And so it expands it into the urban. That's why I didn't make a change there, because I think that does give a much wider spread. And so that may be an intermediary type of a zone between the country neighborhoods and the urban residential. And so that's why that was my thought process on that, to give some type of a little bit more of a transition between those properties.
I think now that council's motion or direction to staff has been that N3 will stay a single family zoning, I certainly think that there is going to have to be a revision of the urban residential category because of the N3 not being necessarily the same. And we could look at adding the N3 into the country neighborhoods and renaming country neighborhoods to that if that's the direction we would need from council.
Yeah, as far as the N4, again, that's a county designation now. I'll try to bring an initiative here soon on that so that it'll make that a little more clear of what N4 would look like. It'll be similar to county with a little bit of a few modifications.
I think I'd have
Yeah. Just to follow up, I think, yeah, we're going to have to take a look at some of that, because it brings in other issues regarding the planned neighborhood developments and other things. And I'm not sure, yeah, just how that would all work. So we'll have to explore that a little bit.
Okay. All right. And then,
One thing I forgot to, oh, sorry.
sorry, hold on just a second.
No, go ahead.
Councilman
I can follow.
Bernice, you said something about an initiative coming forward. Are you going to work on this also?
Yeah, this is not the time. I mean, it only impacts because N4 is a category that I'm going to ask to be coming into the city. It'd be more like urban farming, urban ranching, that would be coming into the cities. Because of that's what a lot of those properties outside the city are. And we want to make sure we have a path forward for them to join the city without having to modify their property.
Good.
One thing, I guess, if I could just add to that, and then I wanted to note something else that Anna reminded me of. Just keep in mind too that your zoning, like if you're in N3, you have to, you meet the minimums, like what's required in N3. You can certainly go the other direction. There's nothing that says you can't. And if you have a very large lot, which we have some of those, that's N3, yeah, it looks the same as a county, a one lot county, property right now. So just keep that in mind in terms of being, drilling into some of those, that there's a lot of flexibility there when you're up at those higher, like the N3 district in the city, in terms of what you can do going up versus, how the minimum that you can meet. The other thing I just want to mention, and this is maybe too late now, but we can share this as well. We put together like these additional slides, and this is in the presentation that you got, that goes into the zoning, the character, and the density for each one. So like you can see through county neighborhood, it talks about units per acre. As you go down into urban residential limited, it talks about units, talks about character, and then you get into the urban residential, et cetera, and then it goes from there. So just happy to, you can take a look at this, and if you have more questions, this fits in with the chart, but it gives you a little more detail on like the span within each of those with the zoning districts that are allowed, and then also the units and the character, and it goes all the way through all of them. So that was sent out just a little bit before the meeting, but as you look through things, if you have questions, this is helpful as well. So.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy? Are you guys done?
We are over.
Holy cow, you're over. All right, Mr. Kennedy?
Just two things for the council.
Oh, well, hold on just a second. I'm sorry. We got ahead of ourselves. Good job, you guys. Thank you very much. You did a lot of work, and we appreciate it. All right, now you're on.
Mayor, two things for the council. This evening.
Mayor, point of order. Are we doing public comment on this item? Or are we going to wait until, I'm sorry.
We're going to finish with public comment.
Thank you.
I'm just making some references for you for tonight and in the future. Item number 3, renewal of Citizens Police Advisory Board. That's an issue that we have moved that over to the organizational committee. And this evening, I would ask that we just pull that, because that will be recommended with all of the rest of them. That was my initiative item. We have already gone forward on that. So item number 3 could be removed. I don't know if anybody's coming to speak on it tonight, but that's an issue that we do not need to have on the agenda. And the other is, we sent out a notice to all the council people on your priorities for the legislative, for this next legislature. And so would you please review that and get it back? We have a meeting on Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So if you would get those back so we can discuss them. If we don't have everyone's, I will call you up to try to, probably not this week, but I will call up to make sure, because we don't want to go forward with the council priorities without having everyone at least give their input back on it. And this Wednesday, Chris, I will get you, I'll run back to the office and send the proposed agenda to you. but we do have two Representative Schomer and Senator Yakowicz coming and doing a presentation. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Then I'm going to open the meeting up to public comment on non-agenda items. Remember, come on up and speak to us. Tell us who you are. Give us your name and just about where you live. And then you get your 3 minutes.
How about that? Wow. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Jack Hansen. I was born and raised here in Billings. I currently live in and pay property taxes in Ward 4. As a citizen and taxpayer, so first, I just want to offer some general observations on the special work sessions that you've just concluded. As a citizen and taxpayer, I'm a bit chagrined at the cavalier way in which council members frequently overlook or discount the recommendations from your own in-house staff and experts to offer arguments, or worse yet, take votes, actually vote in a certain way, grounded in what appears to be little more than, it seems to me that X, Y, and Z, or I heard from a constituent that A, B, and C. As a general rule, gut instincts and anecdotal evidence are not a good way to make long-term public policy that affects all of us here in Billings. So, for example, the decision you took today not to adopt housing incentive option A, and just for the record, I'm not particularly wed to housing incentive option A, but you took a decision today not to adopt that. It went against the recommendation of the interim planning committee and your own planning staff. And indeed, it went against the advice of the one council member who actually works in the development space. It just ends up looking pretty seat of the pants. So on a related note, I realized that today was a work session, so not subject to the strict procedures of Robert's rules. But you took a close vote today to reconsider a decision, actually a recommendation, that you adopted by majority of vote in the last session. Now, if you were following Robert's rules, you could reconsider a previous vote only if the motion for reconsideration came from a member who was on the winning side. There's a reason for that. That didn't happen today. There's a reason that Robert's rules works that way. It's a big deal to reverse yourself on a vote that you just took in the last session. It bogs down your own work, and it threatens to undermine your credibility as a decision-making body. Surely you realize that. So I offer these observations in the hope that you will proceed more deliberately and a bit more carefully in the future, even during work sessions. Doing so can only help to enhance your credibility in the public's eye. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting, and unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you.